So who gets to decide what is peak anime? Well, today it's me. I'm going to decide. And this one's going to go all the way back to my far-off youth, another time. Nothing's really ever hit me quite the same. Now you might say, should we really listen to people on the internet about what they feel or anything in particular? Like, who the hell are they, right? And I'd agree, unless they were telling you to support Steven's Patreon at www.patreon.com/Steven with maybe 5 M's, I forget. Now, first we have to start talking about Garfield. This show is pretty much the equivalent to Garfield, and I might regret saying that, but Dejiko of Digicharat is a very similar creature to Garfield, and maybe not so similar I should be telling people to, I don't know, draw Dejiko in place of Garfield. I mean, I would never encourage that. Never. But there is one major place where they have quite big similarities. Business acumen. You see, Jim Davis created Garfield specifically with the purpose of, yeah, we could sell a bunch of stuff with this. And he was right. And that's pretty similar for Dejiko, who was created not as a character, but as a brand mascot for the company Broccoli. This was for their stores that lived in Akihabara. They sold like anime figures and anime and games and toys and whatever else. Gamer. Yes, they were actually called Gamer. This is a store for gamers by gamers. And Digicharat was going to be the thing that would rise them out of the embers and make us fall all the way into this weird rabbit hole. If we're getting into the details here, we're going to have to start this by talking about a database and the grand narrative. Now, the grand narrative was a concept theory that came out maybe in like the 70s about it doesn't really matter where you as an audience member start consuming stuff. You'll eventually find your way back to the source. And this is kind of what the media mix process of Japanese franchising is all about. But what comes with that is a theory created by Hiroki Asuma called the database. The database is a way that anime fans, specifically otaku, categorize the characters, turning them all into almost like little data pieces that go through the matrix into a little spreadsheet, every little element into what he sometimes calls moe elements, especially visually. And when they are in the spreadsheet, they put them down, if that be the antennas, or the cat ears, or the little bows. They are then stored in that database until they are needed for further iterations on these characters. Asuma claims, at least, that Digicharat doesn't really have a character of its own. It didn't have a narrative, with no real authorship involved in it. In fact, saying that some of the more extreme elements of Dejiko's character we see a little bit later are basically parodies of its original former self. Now, I have to kind of dispute a fair bit of this, because Hiroki doesn't seem to understand that Dejiko as a character was pretty much formed specifically within the original manga from Gamer's stores. And this was made by Konge Donbo, even going to say effectively that Dejiko is based pretty much off 80% of their own personality. Take that as you will. But specifically, they set down the groundwork, which we will see as the franchise continues. Without them, I don't know if it would really be the same character. And this may dispute the sort of more meta aspect of the database, as Koge has said on record that a lot of moe artists who specifically draw these kind of cute characters with all these elements were women at the time, and they just enjoyed drawing cute things. We could also say that the creator of Dejiko put a lot of effort into making each character its own individual thing, even though, yeah, we can see there are adjustments made to the final design which may form back to that database idea as they add things in like the maid aspect. But either way, Koge's designs, characters, really skyrocketed both Broccoli and the author into another world. This is our first look at the animated Dejiko, and the dynamics are formed in front of our very eyes. Every puzzle piece comes together besides maybe one. In 1999, Broccoli started thinking about the concept of a voice actor for Dejiko. Out of the 525 of these people that showed up, only one was victorious, of course. Sanada Asami. First-time voice actor, and maybe got a bit more than they were bargaining here, as things kept to escalate from here when a TV producer saw these adverts and was like, you might as well just make this into a TV show. The Gamer ad seemed to have gotten the intrigue of the actual director as well, who said the amount of no in that advert drove him a little bit insane, but also piqued his interest enough to end up getting the job. It's that blazing fast style, absurd humor and slapstick. It's hard to compare it to stuff, but if I was, I'd probably say those Hololive shorts, even though it's decades apart, I think it does hold that sort of same samey energy. After all, these are the digital idols of their day, creating the forefront of what it meant to be a fictional, musical, eccentric anime girl. But if I really want to talk about idols, I should probably ask an expert, like Menopause. Menopause specifically talks about this as almost like a trio of danger when it comes to idols. You start with the little sister, we move into the school friend. This situation, maybe I'd call them gremlin. If I was to be nice though, let's even out with maybe exchange student. And then the older sister. Dejiko may be cute, dare I say, moe, but she's kind of not exactly what you'd expect from a model idol. Never quite staying on model to begin with, and thinking about doing things like, I don't know, turning brothers into salacious comics that she could sell at conventions. She could win an award for how ghoulish she can be at times, but there is also something quite endearing about her. Perhaps it's that she lives the life of a wage slave who also can get away with messing with customers, and sometimes is hit by the realities that we can all relate to. In an era of doomsaying, Dejiko sees the collapse of the world as something to grin about. She doesn't care. Even if she could help, she doesn't necessarily have the energy to do it. Not for any good reason, anyway. You can almost say that some of this feels a bit like a shitpost. I think it's maybe the nature coming from the director's approach, which is to let people sort of add and not be too precious about the story, kind of giving it that improv 2 style. Maybe it shows something about you don't need to necessarily be a traditional animation to be successful. You don't need that 20-minute length. Maybe 3 minutes is enough. Maybe when you let creativity sort of bloom and the creators basically go on to do whatever they want, pretty much unsupervised by Broccoli, you get something interesting in the end. Something that's more than the sum of its parts. I mean, I'm surprised any company would let them sully their mascot in such a way, but what can I say? Seemed to have worked. So kudos to Madhouse for making 16 episodes within that 25-day period. What is that? What's that song? Yeah. That's my jam. You know, it's fun to see some of the credits too. There wasn't too many animators who actually made this, but there was Studio Junio who did a couple sections. I'm not necessarily sure why or where, but if I had to guess, I would assume it's this episode with the little music video. Now, Junio were also known for doing a sort of music intro for Sonic CD, so I think this tracks a little bit, but you never quite can tell. Either way, what a great series. But wait, there's more. No, 16 episodes at 3 minutes each. Despite that explosive ending, it wasn't quite enough for everyone. And 6 months later, in the summer heat, we get something that's just needs to be seen to be believed. It's too much. We'll be right back. If this is the beginning, maybe we can expect many great things from this bold new millennium. There is something about it that does feel very improv, having the character use their own motif to create a song on the fly, and while being a bit tongue-in-cheek, it really does capture many of the aspects of the show, if it be the atmosphere of the otaku mecha Akihabara, or just that cynical attitude it has at times. Also, it doesn't let you forget the idea that, yeah, these are really idols, and they're going on tour. As you can see, DUP, featuring Dejiko, Puchiko, and Usada together, went on tour, and they did the live shows all around, and you know, it looks like a lot of fun. I mean, I kind of wish they had done the cosplays, but even so, you know, it's a grooving time. Right, I guess the franchising had really popped off because that grand narrative was in place. You had those audio CDs, you had the idol stuff, you had the dramas, the cards, whatever they could give you, they probably already had. And on top of that, we start to see bigger voice actors joining the cast. We have the Sayu, Megumi Hayashibara, playing Pyoko, who then becomes a little bit more of an antagonist. But the funny thing about the special is the real antagonist is the invisible hand of the market.
こんな大店舗のライバル店が目と鼻の先にできて大丈夫ゲンマ？
お互い競い合い、切磋琢磨し、この業界全体を盛り上げる、これぞ資本主義経済の理想ではありませんか。さあ、僕も頑張るぞ。
That seems to be like a meta-commentary for the entire position of the series, since it was created by a 7-story building expanding its business into territories that had been there for 50 years but were slowly being run out by these otaku stores. But you know what they say, there's always a bigger store who's ready to run you out, and I guess in this instance, the spirit of competition can eat shit. Because Dejiko's response to it is sabotage. It's kind of funny the story went in this direction to begin with, because in 2003, I guess you could say Broccoli was in a similar kind of situation, because they had a pretty bad year, a bad quarter, and ended up getting bought by a different conglomerate and getting absorbed. And the iconic Dejiko store was the casualty in the face. I guess they couldn't take her original response. By this point though, the specials kept coming for quite some time. And we start to see a little bit of a question about how far the 3-minute structure has, because these all become longer, they expand, and sometimes they become more sincere and about the actual character relationships, asking the question of how are these characters feeling.
知ってるよ。君はプッティコちゃんだよね。僕はラッキャー。デジカラットのビッグファンだよ。
He's literally me. Funny enough, Digicharat became pretty popular in the States, even though they had no idea what a gamer store was. The, I guess, zany antics of it all still appealed to them at its core dynamic. And because of that, you start to see things change with the company. Suddenly, oh look, Broccoli Books, they're starting to distribute all these books towards the Americans. Then, hell, maybe you know what a gamer is now, because there was one store opened up in California for all your gamer needs. And finally, you have, I believe it was called Syndication Point, which was their own localization sort of board, who were making sure these Broccoli franchises get to the States in the way they'd like to see them. But there's a lot of these specials, and I need to kind of just absorb them in, just take them all, in. Okay. Maybe they're getting a little bit long in the tooth now, we need to move on to something else. Though I do enjoy watching gamer, psychologically torture the gang. I think that's a pretty fun setup. We have to go where all franchises end, where they have nowhere else to go. Space. Well, I guess we could put some tunes on. Yes, now we're on the big screen. And what we have is a bit of a silly affair. It's not particularly that long, and probably for the best it hits at a sort of 20-minute block, throwing in every character you can expect to see from the series, but also finishing up a nice bow on everything in terms of giving every little character a little bit of a shine moment, and explaining what exactly was going on with Dejiko, going really into that princess lore, and finally giving her some time to go back to her home world. Eventually, the Queen of Akihabara will come back to her servants one day, and maybe right at the end there, when she's feeling like it, and she'll make her own beautiful return. So I guess we're done, right? I mean, that's the end. It's a pretty nice little conclusion to that story. We're good to go, right? That was peak, right? That was... No? Oh, yeah, I guess there's all the spin-offs and everything else, and all the other wacky stuff that happened. Alright, after all, I'm a little tired of all this anime talk. I mean, I thought this was about gamers. This store is called Gamers, right? We need some real gamer work in here. We need to get our game on. And I think Broccoli agrees with me, because in 2001, you start to see them really publish a lot of games. These sort of Raising Rayon Army games feature a little special cameo from Dejiko herself. Really, we start to see a sort of all kinds of variety of things, if that be this sort of weird Game Boy Pachinko thing, which was a clone of another version that was made for Evangelion on the Game Boy Color. Okay. And then what about internet browser? Hey, you know, if you've got a Dreamcast but no personal computer with your modem, maybe it's time to try that out. And you get a little fun little Easter eggs in there too. I mean, I like this little bit here, you know, if you don't talk to Dejiko, she might blow you up. But really, I think it's all about the real practicality of this thing. You know, I might actually need to do a little bit of research myself right now. Give me 1 sec.
Yeah, this is how I do all the research for my videos, if you've ever wondered. Probably why it takes so long.
When we get into the real meat of it, we have things like Digicharat Fantasy, which at the start looks like a traditional sort of Digicharat setup until they go to another world. Yeah, Dejiko goes to a fantasy world where she loses her memories and is probably more like an average girl. Seems there's like a lot of ending and directions to go, lots of interesting cutscenes, but none of it was ever translated, so I don't know how much you're going to get out of it unless you know the language very well. But these look good though. Pretty good looking. And when it comes to more unconventional games from the franchise, let me point you to M2's games for the GBA. Now, M2 in itself is a very interesting choice, because they're mostly known for porting games, especially on the Sega systems, including Digicharat Fantasy, which they moved to the PS2. Maybe that's how they got the job. And they made 2 games for the GBA. I don't know if I know the right genre for something that's like Digicharat. It doesn't really seem to fit in any particular box. But they went with Business Sim, which if you think about what this is as a franchise, it's actually a very fitting and funny choice. And look, I can't really comment too much on the game, because if I was any good at business, I wouldn't be a YouTuber. It's also only in Japanese too, but it's a very polished release, nice sprites, good music. What more can I say? Okay, well now we get into the Pyoko OVA, and we're starting to go into the digital era. What's interesting about that, I suppose, is a very different approach to animation, and this one's probably the closest sort of through point between the two different distinct eras of Dejiko. And the director has a very pragmatic perspective on what it means to go digital. You know, there are some things that you can do easier, some things that maybe you lose, but that's just kind of the nature of it. Especially as you go forward, you find new ways of doing stuff. It's basically an alternate retelling of the Dejiko story from the perspective of Pyoko. Pretty supplemental if I'm honest, but there is some interesting novelties to it, including the oddity of how they dubbed it. Now, like I said before, they do it in-house, but Fujiko actually retains her Japanese voice actor in the English dub, so you get some pretty interesting line deliveries, which
And why would you even want to kidnap Dejiko? For the money, of course, Pio. That's simply outrageous. She's evil.
Well, it's still from the same director, as he's pretty much done every release we've seen so far. He's very dedicated to the series, you could say, along with the team of members he brings with him. You know, it's still all at Madhouse. But now we're getting into spin-off town a little bit more broadly. We're going to talk about the one part of the franchise not directed by him. Panyo Panyo. This is pretty much just Digicharat babies. It sort of jigs the format from Planet Digicharat. It's effectively a young story of a much nicer, maybe much more princess-style Dejiko and her new established friends, and their sort of misadventures. It's pretty much almost too sweet, though it's kind of interesting to see that the person who did the series composition for it is maybe not what you'd usually expect. It is from the writer Toshiyuki Inoue, who's probably most well known for his tokusatsu stuff and looking like a pretty mean dude. Funny thing about it for me though, is that while it looks like this, you know, this was actually premiered at like 12:30 at night, originally. I would assume because of the nature of the show it was made for kids, but it was actually the reruns that ran on Sunday that were shown at 9:30 AM. And that's kind of actually an interesting point of trajectory for the series, because this one obviously must have done well enough to get what may be considered a follow-on, or basically just a retelling of the Digicharat format called Neo, which did air at 9:30 in the morning, and did sort of feel like it was aimed at a much younger audience. It took the 3-minute sort of hyperactive, explosive situation that we saw in the prior series and turned it into more 10-minute, slow, slice of life, featurette little bits and pieces where we focus more on the princess aspect of Dejiko. That becomes more at the forefront. It was kind of almost a side thought in the last series. You didn't even hear about it until the summer special, you know? It was just like, oh yeah, I guess that's a thing. But now, there are all these 7 very marketable items, most of them you probably don't see very often, that come from the show that you can now buy at home. Oh, look at that mobile phone. Maybe I do actually need a mobile phone. Maybe I need a new one. I mean, that looks pretty good actually now I think about it. But yeah, it's different. Perhaps for a man with Irish blood, I feel a little bit like overthrowing that royalty. I don't really want to see that aspect of it. I would rather see Dejiko more as a sort of vagrant bum than I would as a, I don't know, disheveled princess. But I guess that's just me. What I would say about Neo is it's basically like a funhouse mirror version of the original series. It's similar but different in a lot of aspects, almost feeling like it's repeating itself in strange but new ways. It's not even set in Akihabara anymore. It created this new aspect called the Lucky Cat District, which is fine and cool, but there is definitely something about it that is worth examining in how it contrasts from Akihabara. This is a slow town with a sort of slow mentality. Everything's pretty chill, you know, everything's also a little bit more traditional than you'd expect. You know, we have bathhouses, we have these sort of bake stores that only really sell Japanese goods with 80 years of tradition behind them. There's not anything particularly fast moving in the city. There's not even any franchise buildings. In fact, the one villain that you might see as a really just character that's never shown to have any redeeming qualities is the real estate tycoon. And one of his more devious plots, I think, comes in episode 50, where he basically just sees the toy shop in the place and like, this toy shop sucks. I'm just gonna, fucking corporate it. We're gonna remove it and put something else in there. And there's a whole conversation with the people of the town who are just like, hey, no, that means no.
If Toys R Us moves into town and starts selling goods, the whole neighborhood will prosper. Yeah, that's a good thing.
Come on now, don't listen to that freak.
I like Toys R Us. I'm gonna benefit more than anyone from this deal.
Basically, each little business is a family-run store that has people that run it that you get to meet, and their personality and quirks of the series is all displayed fully. Where the original show, you didn't really even go past the gamer store, and everything else was sort of irrelevant. It would mostly blow up half the time. Now, when we're talking about the town, there is an interesting article in Fandom Unbound about Akihabara as a place, because if you go back maybe 100 years, maybe the Lucky Cat District and this would not be that different than what Akihabara was. At some point post-war, it becomes a bit more of what they call the electric town. They start selling a lot of stuff to families, and yeah, we can see the reference point there. It seems like this Lucky Cat District's more of a sort of tourist spot for families, and that's kind of what Akihabara once upon a time was, until the otaku spirit took it over. But it's a conversation for a different day, I'm sure. But then, when you get to them going to Akihabara, the reaction is quite interesting. Dejiko hates this place. She's like, oh, it's warm and smelly and there's people moving around all the time and I don't like this sort of new, fast city life ways. I'm not okay with that. And that is a very different response than maybe we'd see from the original series Dejiko for sure. But the end of this episode, Dejiko is basically pulled into the guts of Akihabara to maybe never return, as we see there. There's no real contract of how she got out of there. But I suppose if you consider that a metaphor of her being digested into the town. But I will be honest, there's one major problem on top of everything else that really grinds my gears about Neo. It's that colour of her hair. I don't care if that's what it's supposed to look like. I prefer it when it's a little bit more emerald green than it is grass green. I prefer it on the bluer side of the spectrum. I don't like this. I do not like this shade of green. Neo, I'm pretty sure my shit list. Look, I'm not going to say nothing works in this show. It's not like it's my arch enemy or something. I do think sometimes the elements added to the show can be quite interesting, especially the episode where they try and convince Dejiko not to use her laser beams and use that sort of princess training against her, and they sort of torture her. In fact, any episode where everything gets a little bit more malicious, I like for some reason. I don't know what that says about me, but those are usually more the fun episodes. And here we go. What do we give a big old list here? This is the episodes I generally quite liked. Like, we could talk about episode 18, that feels like something out of Cromartie High School, and oh yeah, but I guess the director did also make that at the exact same time as this show, maybe towards the end. That to me seemed a little unhinged, an idea that he's just directing 2 different shows at 2 different studios, but go off, Sakurai, I guess, go off. I mean, it definitely seems that the people out there were fans of these kind of things. He may have even made a subtle reference to it in the Digicharat movie, as we can see from like this thing over here. Now, I was wondering if that was just a reference to the musician, but also there's a funny little motif of music here that I can hear with my little ears, and that does sound very similar to something that came later. I wonder if that was supposed to be almost like a point of inspiration. I don't know.
That's him? Is this dude in high school?
I gotta say, when we're talking about Cromartie, it's hard to not mention it without the Sakurai. He's a guy who's done a lot of great comedy work, and Cromartie might be one of the best ways of expressing that. You know, you see it in the way it moves. It's a really interesting looking show, and it's really fun, and it's only 10 minutes per episode, but I use that 10 minutes much better than I would say Neo does personally, so, you know, if I was recommending one. But that's against the point here, because I think I'm getting a little distracted here, because, you know, Sakurai's also done a lot of other fun comedy shows that you could probably check out. Maybe just check it out here. He's known pretty well for this sort of stuff, you know. Of course, the people he also works with, you know, his friends, and I don't want to put it all on Sakurai, because a lot of this is going to be Madhouse's talent pool being pretty great too. You make more Cromartie from this shot, but I know it from this bit. But I digress. Let's try and get back to the show. It's 102 10-minute episodes of this show. No, 104 even. God, I've been forgetting a couple. It's long, okay? It's really long. Maybe not for the better sometimes. Sometimes change is nice. Like, say for example, last 20 episodes or plus or so of Neo, they changed the format completely and added this sort of princess school element that I absolutely hate and didn't want to watch. So, that's that, yeah. Change. So, Winter Gardens, that's basically, you know, what if Digicharat was a completely different show? You know, like a JC staff romance show. Cool, eh? It's, definitely doesn't have the funny faces as much, you know. I could have done with a couple more funny faces. Also, Dejiko's lost her bratty veneer with age, but it's still a fun time nonetheless. The staff had little experience with the franchise, and it seems the intention was to make them think that this is not the Dejiko you know. Even removing the name of the franchise completely from the title, and when they premiered it, they didn't even say it was anything to do with Digicharat. But you still see a couple little cute references to it, you know, a couple nods here. It's not like this is completely a different situation. Maybe that's the thing about Dejiko, is that she's a little bit of a empty signal, you know. As a franchise brand, she can be whatever needs to be for the situation, you know. The faces may change, but I guess what I'm trying to say is maybe Dejiko is forever. Well, until like a couple years later, in the 10th anniversary, when they replace her with Dejiko 2, removing the voice actor and the character design completely. So what exactly is going on? Well, in 2008, you know, the market crash hits, and I think maybe Broccoli had seen better days. Sync Point, the people who were going to be distributing their stuff in the West, including maybe some of their video games later on, they went down. They went under. So did Broccoli Books, and the Gamer Store, all gone very quickly. In fact, when you look at the licensing for Digicharat stuff, they never even finished releasing Neo anywhere in the States. The last 30 episodes or so, the bad bit, that was never really licensed, and the only place you can really find it, I think, was in maybe Hong Kong, because the subtitles on it aren't very good either. Yeah, I mean, it looks like Digicharat just kind of vanishes, you know. I guess we could ask the question, like, where did it go? Well, when it comes to the other franchises like Galaxy Angel, we see a couple cameos here. Galaxy Angel was probably the most ambitious when it came to its video game side, but Madhouse also dealt with these other adaptations, so you get a nice little cute reference here to Dejiko, and it's not exactly the only show where Dejiko pops up. You get it even in places where, let's say, aren't related to Madhouse or Broccoli. They're quite willing to throw them around. After that sort of more contentious thing that happened in the 10th anniversary, we really have to consider that, at this point, those voice actors are those characters. You can't really have Dejiko be, in my mind, anyone else. Well, luckily, when the 50th anniversary was established, they decided to sort of almost retcon that answer and say, hey, you know that new voice actor, that new song and everything else we did for the new Dejiko? Well, that wasn't actually Dejiko. That was Goddess of Broccoli Corporation. And I guess in a nice way, they also kept that original voice actor. They didn't throw them in the bin or anything. They decided, like, no, you've played this character now, which I think is, you know, that's kind of sweet. As the franchise goes on, a couple more weird cameos. Say, for example, this crazy spin-off of Super Robot Wars is you got Dejiko beating people up and even doing a Depsy roll. I mean, damn, they're really, you know, swiping hard. What about Pujiko? She's in this game over here for some reason. There's a cute reference in Oko's Inn, but it doesn't really have Dejiko. More of a sort of touchy one. I wonder then, maybe Madhouse is looking to make a new series. Well, not exactly, unfortunately. What we do see is the anniversary reunion. We have a new art book. We have a anniversary audio drama CD thing or something, and we have probably more figures and stuff. It looks like there may be hope. We're at the 20th anniversary now. Maybe one day we will see Dejiko and the gang again. I need to feel again, please. Give me this. Funny enough, we also start to see things go a bit full circle here. Dejiko becomes a VTuber. Like, whoa. Okay, I wasn't expecting that. And then she gets a TikTok and a Twitter, and I'm like, she's more up to date than I am. But finally, with the 24th anniversary, we get it. In hard writing, Digicharat's coming back. And it's in the format that we're used to, and maybe even connected to the original series again. Like, the timeline seemed to have reversed back, but of course that's not going to stop them from doing anything they want in terms of referencing. If you're one of those fans that won't watch anything that's old enough to vote, then maybe Reiwa Digicharat is more so for you. I mean, the goofy girls are back and they're pulling on the funny faces, and even the style is more contemporary based on Dombo's new stuff. It's pretty fun to like look through all the history here of, oh, look at this, look at all the stuff she's done. Whoa, like she's done a lot of different kind of art, and you can slowly see that morphing point. But even if the style is a little bit different, the spirit, the heart of it, is back. Akihabara is healing. Reiwa is a beautiful return to the original format of what made the show so great in the first place 20 years out, and hasn't changed a beat. Although it may be a little hard to recommend to first-time viewers since it's stacked with references of all sort of stuff from the prior franchise and a little bit of weight there. Though I guess you could argue that the original show had a bunch of references to the Gamer comics that probably flew way off the heads of the original audience too. All I'm going to say is I kind of wish it was easier for people to watch it because it's not really on any streaming service. At first I thought they were doing something that seemed a little bit more progressive. You know, you have Dejiko even saying, and then I'm like, yeah, but you didn't add any subtitles. No one who doesn't speak Japanese can even understand it. And a lot of those episodes now that were all released on their official YouTube channel are gone. I think you can only watch the first one and the last one now. So even if you were looking to like, hey, I understand Japanese, yeah, they've already removed it. So I don't know what they're doing here. Is it going to come on Crunchyroll now it's finished? Is it going to go on some kind of streaming service? Are you going to officially distribute it to the masses? Because I kind of feel like most people have completely missed that it even came back or heard about it in passing. Were like, oh yeah, that's cool, I guess, but then didn't even get time to check it out. I mean, even the fan subbers haven't even finished putting the whole translation of the show out, so like I can't really blame it. I wish for one day it would be easier to watch this return to the franchise, and maybe that it has a better opportunity to get a bigger audience, because I think it did a pretty solid job. Now, to me personally though, there's something weird about it, because I watch this and I enjoy it and I go, I know what that is a bunch. You know, it's a show almost seems specifically made for me, but that peak feeling inside me, it's just not there. I'm wondering why. Why is it not there anymore like it was when I was a younger man? No, it can't possibly be my fault, can it? No, it's the children who are wrong. No, anime were peaked in 1999. I know that for sure. This is not negotiable. I definitely know this is true. So you see, I can remember in my head. I mean, right? No, I don't know who I am anymore. Am I even the cat maid?
Yeah, well, I thought I was just going to do like a 15-minute video in between stuff. You know, it was January. January ad rates are bad. So I was like, all right, well, I want to do a project on this. I think this seems like an interesting topic. Not many people talk about it. Can't expect it to do well, but if it's done quickly, it doesn't really matter. Like, surely I can do a video on Digicharat on camera basically the whole time. It should be an issue. Well, it was. It was a growing pains experience of learning how to use a green screen properly. I also have to give some special thanks to the people who helped. Gil, I was here, gave me a specific puppet version of a Dejiko that they'd done for another project. A Study of Swords helped me with a couple of bits of research, especially around sword stuff. And Hayden offered me a couple of pictures of some Japanese Digicharat magazines that had interviews in it. Some of that was kind of useful. There was a shitpost in here that was commissioned by a patron of mine. I went a little too hard on it. I was supposed to make it kind of shitty, and I think I went a little bit too on the other side now. So I don't think it reads the way it was supposed to originally now. And of course, as always, these projects are only possible through Patreon. So if anyone wants to support, or if they want the channel to keep going, you can leave a comment, you can share a video. The best way to support it is, even on the smallest donations, is by supporting my Patreon, because that's where I put all my extra stuff, like, you know, videos come out early in Patreon, Discord, etc, etc. We have Jovin, Daniel Strait, Ashkarao, Stavagin, Stratos, Buttery, Chunks, Jay, Foxmolder, who also commissioned the Berserk sequence, Oti, Paul, Stephen Smell, Subsofa, Takeyuki Sasuke, Systematic, and Doji. So yeah, I'll be back real soon, I hope.